The rain started just as I pulled into the driveway, fat drops splattering against the windshield with a rhythm that felt almost accusatory. I sat there for a moment, engine still running, watching the water streak down the glass and blur the familiar outline of my childhood home. The house looked the same as it always had, a two-story colonial with faded blue shutters and a porch that sagged slightly on the left side. Mom had been after Dad to fix that for years, but he never got around to it. Now, sitting here with my hand still gripping the steering wheel, I wondered if anything would ever get fixed in this family. The call had come 3 days ago. Mom's voice on the other end of the line, tight and strained in that way that meant she'd been crying but was trying to hide it. "Your father and I need to talk to you," she'd said. "It's important. Can you come home this weekend?" There was something in her tone that made my stomach clench, something that told me this wasn't about a leaky faucet or help moving furniture. This was serious. I killed the engine and the sudden silence felt heavy, broken only by the drumming of rain on the roof. The smell of wet asphalt drifted through the vents, mixing with the stale coffee scent from the cup holder. I'd driven 4 hours from the city, my mind spinning through possibilities the entire way. Was someone sick? Had Dad lost his job? Were they getting divorced? That last thought had lodged itself in my chest like a stone, making it hard to breathe. The front door opened before I even made it up the walkway, and there was Mom, backlit by the warm glow of the hallway light. She looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to protect herself from something. Her hair, usually so carefully styled, hung limp around her face, and even from a distance I could see the dark circles under her eyes. Come in, you're getting soaked," she said, ushering me inside with quick, nervous movements. Her hands fluttered around me, taking my jacket, pushing my wet hair back from my forehead the way she used to when I was a kid. The house smelled like it always did, like vanilla candles and the faint mustiness of old carpet, but underneath it there was something else. Tension. Fear. It hung in the air like smoke. "Your father's in the living room," Mom said, not quite meeting my eyes. "And Marcus is upstairs. We're all here now." Marcus. My brother. 2 years younger than me, and in so many ways, still a mystery. We'd never been particularly close, not in the way some siblings are. He was quiet where I was outgoing, careful where I was impulsive. He'd stayed local after college, taking a job at an accounting firm downtown, while I'd moved to the city to chase bigger dreams. We saw each other at holidays, exchanged polite texts on birthdays, but there was always this distance between us, this wall I could never quite scale. I followed Mom into the living room, my wet shoes squeaking on the hardwood floor. Dad was sitting in his usual chair, the big leather recliner that had molded itself to his shape over the years. He looked up when I entered, and the expression on his face made my heart skip. He looked old. Not just older, but old, like he'd aged a decade in the months since I'd last seen him. His face was gray, his eyes sunken, and when he tried to smile at me, it came out more like a grimace. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice rough. "Thanks for coming." I sat down on the couch, the familiar cushions sagging beneath me. The coffee table between us was covered with papers, I noticed. Documents, printouts, what looked like bank statements. My stomach tightened another notch. "What's going on?" I asked, looking between them. "You're scaring me." Mom perched on the arm of Dad's chair, her hand resting on his shoulder. They exchanged a look, one of those long married couple looks that communicated volumes without words. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "We've been having some problems," he began. "Financial problems. Serious ones." The words hung in the air between us. Outside, the rain intensified, hammering against the windows with renewed vigor. I could hear the old gutters groaning under the weight of water, that familiar sound from 1,000 childhood storms. "What kind of problems?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Dad leaned forward, picking up one of the papers from the coffee table. His hand shook slightly as he held it. "About 6 months ago, I started noticing irregularities in our accounts. Money missing. Not huge amounts at first, a few hundred here and there, but it added up. I thought maybe I was losing track, getting forgetful. But then it got worse. Larger amounts. Transfers I didn't authorize. Credit cards opened in my name that I never applied for." "Identity theft," I said, relief flooding through me. "That's awful, but it's fixable, right? You can report it, freeze your credit, get the police involved." Mom made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob. "That's what we thought too," she said. "That's what we hoped." "But it wasn't strangers," Dad continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "It was someone who had access to everything. Someone who knew where we kept our important documents, who knew our passwords, our security questions, our routines. Someone inside the family." The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the edge of the couch, my fingers digging into the worn fabric. "What are you saying?" "We've been trying to figure it out for months," Mom said. "We hired a private investigator. We went through everything, every transaction, every withdrawal. And the trail, it all led back to one person. Footsteps on the stairs made us all turn. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his hair damp like he'd just gotten out of the shower. He was wearing his usual weekend outfit, jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, his feet bare on the hardwood. He looked so normal, so ordinary, that for a moment I thought maybe this was all some terrible mistake. "You told her," he said. It wasn't a question. "Marcus," I started, but he held up a hand. "Let me guess," he said, his voice flat. "They told you someone's been stealing from them. Someone in the family. And now you're all looking at me like I'm some kind of criminal." The way he said it, the resignation in his tone, sent a chill down my spine. "Did you?" I asked, the words coming out sharper than I intended. "Did you steal from them?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's the question, isn't it? Did Marcus, the quiet one, the boring one, the one who never left town, did he betray his own family?" The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear the clock on the mantel ticking, each second stretching out impossibly long. The rain continued its assault on the windows, and somewhere in the house, a pipe groaned. "Answer the question," Dad said, his voice hard in a way I'd rarely heard it. Marcus walked into the room, moving with a strange calm that felt almost eerie. He sat down in the chair opposite me, leaning back like we were about to have a casual conversation about the weather. "You want the truth?" he asked, looking at each of us in turn. "Fine. Yes." I took the money. I opened the credit cards. I transferred funds out of your accounts. All of it. That was me. Mom made a sound like she'd been punched. Even though they'd suspected, even though the evidence had pointed to him, hearing him admit it out loud was clearly something else entirely. Dad's face went from gray to red, his hands clenching into fists on the arms of his chair. "How could you?" Mom whispered. We're your parents. We gave you everything. Everything, Marcus repeated, and now there was an edge to his voice, something sharp and bitter. You gave me everything. That's rich. I felt like I was watching this scene from underwater, everything distorted and slow. This was my brother, the person I'd grown up with, shared a bathroom with, fought over the remote control with. And he was sitting here, calmly admitting to destroying our parents' financial security. Why? I managed to ask. Why would you do this? Marcus turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw real emotion in his eyes. Anger. Deep, burning anger that seemed to have been simmering for years. You really don't know, do you? He said. None of you have any idea. Then tell us, Dad demanded. Make us understand how you could justify this. Marcus stood up, pacing to the window. He stood there for a moment, his back to us, watching the rain. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but no less intense. Do you remember when I was 16? He asked. When I wanted to go to that summer program at MIT? The engineering camp? I remembered, vaguely. Marcus had been obsessed with it, had talked about nothing else for months. They turned me down, Marcus continued. Said we couldn't afford it. But that same summer, he turned to look at me, you went to Europe. 3 weeks backpacking with your friends. Do you remember that? The memory came back, sharp and clear. I'd been 18, just graduated high school. It had been an amazing trip, one of the best experiences of my life. That was different, Mom said weakly. That was a graduation present. Right, Marcus said. Different. It was always different when it came to her. When she wanted to go to that expensive private college, you found a way. You took out loans, you refinanced the house. But when I wanted to go to State U instead of community college, suddenly money was tight. When she needed a car for her internship, you bought her one. When I needed a car to get to work, you told me to save up and buy my own. That's not fair, I said, feeling defensive. I worked for everything I got. Did you? Marcus asked, and the look he gave me was almost pitying. Did you really? Or did you just never notice all the ways they smoothed the path for you while I had to claw my way forward? The room felt too hot suddenly, the air too thick. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but memories were surfacing now, things I hadn't thought about in years. The way Mom had always made my favorite meals when I came home from college, while Marcus got whatever was easy. The way Dad had helped me with my resume, had made calls to his connections to help me get interviews, while Marcus had been told to figure it out himself. Little things. Constant things. So this is about jealousy? Dad said, his voice dripping with disgust. You stole from us because you were jealous of your sister? It's not about jealousy, Marcus shot back. It's about fairness. It's about being invisible in your own family. Do you know what it's like to watch your parents pour everything into one child while the other one just exists in the background? To be the afterthought, the backup plan, the one who doesn't quite measure up? We never treated you differently, Mom insisted, but her voice wavered. You did, Marcus said flatly. You always did. And I learned to live with it. I learned to be the good son, the quiet one, the one who didn't make waves. I stayed close, I visited every week, I helped with the yard work and the house repairs and all the things she was too busy to do. And you know what? You barely noticed. It was always, have you talked to your sister? Did you see what your sister posted? Your sister got a promotion. Your sister bought a condo. Your sister, your sister, your sister. Stop it, I said, my voice shaking. This isn't about me. Isn't it? Marcus turned to face me fully. When was the last time you called them just to talk? When was the last time you came home when it wasn't a holiday? I'm here every week. Every single week. And they spend half that time talking about you. The accusation hung in the air, and I couldn't deny it. I'd been so focused on my own life, my own career, my own problems. I called on Sundays, usually, but often I was distracted, half paying attention while I did other things. And visits home, they'd become less frequent over the years, always with some excuse about work or plans or traffic. But even if that's true, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, even if we weren't perfect, how does that justify stealing from them? They're your parents, Marcus. You've put them in debt. Real debt. The kind that could cost them their house. You think I don't know that? Marcus said, and for the first time, his composure cracked. His voice broke, and I saw his hands shaking. You think I'm proud of this? You think I wanted it to come to this? Then why? Mom asked, tears streaming down her face now. Baby, why? Marcus sank back into the chair, his head in his hands. The fight seemed to drain out of him all at once, leaving him looking smaller, younger, almost like the little brother I remembered from childhood. Because I was desperate, he said, his voice muffled. Because I got into trouble, and I didn't know what else to do. What kind of trouble? Dad asked, his anger giving way to concern despite everything. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The only sound was the rain and Mom's quiet crying. Finally, he looked up, his eyes red. Gambling, he said. I got into gambling. It started small, just online poker, something to do in the evenings. But then I started winning, and it felt good. It felt like finally, I was good at something. Something that was mine. So I played more. And then I started losing. And I kept thinking I could win it back, that I just needed one good night, one good hand. But it never came. Oh, Marcus, Mom breathed. I got in deep with some people, he continued. Bad people. The kind who don't take no for an answer when you owe them money. They started threatening me. Said they'd hurt me, hurt you. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't come to you because I knew what you'd say. I knew you'd be disappointed. And I couldn't ask her, he gestured at me, because she'd just see me as the screw-up little brother who couldn't get his life together. So you stole from us instead, Dad said, but some of the hardness had left his voice. I told myself it was temporary, Marcus said. I told myself I'd pay it back. I'd get a second job, I'd work overtime, I'd figure it out. But the debt kept growing, and they kept demanding more, and I kept taking more to cover it. And then it spiraled. It all just spiraled out of control. The weight of his words settled over the room like a blanket. I felt sick, my stomach churning with a mixture of anger and guilt and confusion. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was weak and selfish and wrong. But another part, a part one didn't want to acknowledge, understood. Not the stealing, never that, but the feeling of being overlooked, of being the lesser child. I'd never seen it from his perspective before. How much? Dad asked quietly. How much do you owe? Marcus laughed, that same hollow sound from before. More than you lost. Way more. The money I took, it barely made a dent. I still owe almost $70,000. The number hit like a physical blow. $70,000. It was an impossible sum, a mountain of debt that would take years to climb out from under. We have to go to the police, I said, though the words felt heavy in my mouth. Marcus, you have to turn yourself in. And these people you owe money to, they need to be reported too. No, Marcus said sharply. No police. You don't understand what these people are capable of. If I go to the police, if I rat them out, they'll come after all of you. They've made that very clear. So what's your solution? Dad asked. We just let you keep stealing? We lose everything we've worked for our entire lives? No, Marcus said. I'm done stealing. I'm done with all of it. I just needed you to know the truth. I needed you to understand why. Understanding doesn't fix this, I said. Understanding doesn't give them back their retirement savings or their good credit or their sense of security. I know, Marcus said, and he sounded so tired, so defeated. I know it doesn't. Nothing I say or do can fix this. I've destroyed everything. I've destroyed us. Mom stood up suddenly, moving to the window where Marcus had stood earlier. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring out at the rain-soaked yard. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. I need some air, she finally said, her voice barely audible. I need to think. She left the room, and we heard the back door open and close. Through the window, I could see her standing on the covered porch, just at the edge of the rain, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Dad stood too, moving slowly like his joints hurt. He looked at Marcus for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I don't know what to do with this, he said finally. I don't know how to process any of this. You're my son. I love you. But what you've done, it's unforgivable. I know, Marcus whispered. Dad left the room, heading upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close, the sound final and heavy. And then it was just Marcus and me, sitting in the living room of our childhood home, the rain still falling outside, the distance between us feeling wider than ever. I should hate you, I said after a while. I should be furious with you. You should, Marcus agreed. I hate myself enough for both of us. I looked at him, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes that matched Mom's, his skin pale and drawn. His hands were still shaking slightly, and I noticed his fingernails were bitten down to the quick, a nervous habit he'd had as a kid but that I thought he'd outgrown. Were you really that unhappy? I asked. Growing up, I mean. Was it really that bad? Marcus considered the question, his gaze distant. It wasn't bad, he said slowly. That's the thing. It wasn't abuse or neglect or anything dramatic. It was just, I always felt like I was in second place. Like I was the consolation prize. You were the star, the one with the bright future, the one they were proud of. And I was just there. The other kid. The backup. I never knew you felt that way, I said, and it was true. I'd been so wrapped up in my own life, my own struggles and triumphs, that I'd never stopped to consider what it was like for him. How could you? Marcus said, but there was no accusation in it, just resignation. You were living your life. That's what you were supposed to do. It's not your fault that they made you the favorite. I don't think they meant to, I said, though even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. Maybe they had. Maybe it had been unconscious, but real nonetheless. Intent doesn't really matter, does it? Marcus said. The result is the same. We sat in silence for a while, the sound of the rain filling the space between us. I thought about all the years, all the moments I'd taken for granted. The way Mom's face lit up when I called. The way Dad bragged about me to his friends. Had Marcus been standing there, watching, feeling invisible? The thought made my chest ache. What happens now? I asked finally. Marcus shrugged. I don't know. I guess that's up to them. And you. If you want to press charges, I'll understand. I deserve it. It's not about what you deserve, I said. It's about what's right. And what's right is complicated. Everything's complicated, Marcus said with a bitter smile. That's the family motto, isn't it? Nothing is ever simple. I stood up, my legs stiff from sitting. I walked to the window, looking out at the rain. Mom was still on the porch, sitting now on the old wooden bench Dad had built years ago. She looked so small, so fragile, and I felt a surge of anger at Marcus for putting her through this. But underneath the anger was something else. Guilt. Because he was right, in a way. I had been absent. I had taken their love and support for granted while barely giving anything back. I'm going to talk to her, I said, not looking at Marcus. And then we're all going to sit down and figure this out. Together. Like a family should. We're not much of a family anymore, Marcus said quietly. Maybe not, I agreed. But we're all we've got. I grabbed an old raincoat from the hook by the door and stepped outside. The air was cool and damp, smelling of wet earth and grass. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, and I could hear the sound of water rushing through the gutters and downspouts. Mom looked up as I approached, her face wet with rain and tears. Can I sit? I asked. She nodded, scooting over to make room on the bench. I sat down beside her, close enough that our shoulders touched. For a moment, we just sat there, watching the rain fall on the yard, on the garden Mom had planted every spring for as long as I could remember, on the old swing set that was still standing in the corner, rusted but stubborn. I don't know what to do, Mom said finally, her voice hoarse from crying. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe it can't be fixed, I said gently. Maybe we just have to figure out how to move forward. He's my baby, she said, and her voice broke on the words. He's my son. How can I be so angry at him and still love him so much? I think that's what family is, I said. Loving people even when they hurt you. Even when they disappoint you. Did we really favor you? She asked, turning to look at me. Were we really that blind? I wanted to say no, to reassure her, but I couldn't. The truth was sitting between us, heavy and undeniable. I think maybe you did, I said softly. Not on purpose. Not maliciously. But yeah, I think you did. She closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I never wanted him to feel less than. I never wanted either of you to feel anything but loved. I know, I said, taking her hand. I know you didn't. But Marcus, he's different from me. He's quieter, less demanding. And I think maybe that made it easy to overlook him. To assume he was fine because he never complained. He should have said something, Mom said. He should have told us how he felt. Would you have heard him? I asked, and the question hung in the air between us. Would we have listened? Mom didn't answer, but she didn't need to. We both knew the truth. Marcus had been invisible because we'd let him be invisible. Because it was easier, because I was louder and more present and demanded more attention. And he'd suffered for it, silently, until that suffering had twisted into something dark and desperate. The gambling, Mom said. I had no idea. How did I not know my own son was in trouble? He hid it, I said. And we weren't looking. We were all so caught up in our own lives that we stopped really seeing each other. What do we do now? Mom asked, and the helplessness in her voice broke my heart. Do we call the police? Do we press charges? He's admitted to everything. The evidence is all there. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me thinks we should. What he did was wrong, Mom. Really wrong. He stole from you. He put you in financial jeopardy. That's not something we can just sweep under the rug. But he's family, Mom said. He's my son. That doesn't give him a free pass, I said. Family doesn't mean accepting abuse or theft or betrayal without consequences. So we turn him in? We send him to prison? The thought made me feel sick, but I forced myself to consider it. Marcus in prison, wearing an orange jumpsuit, locked away from the world. It seemed impossible, surreal. But people went to prison for what he'd done. People lost everything. I think we need to talk to a lawyer, I said finally. We need to understand our options. And Marcus needs help. Real help. For the gambling, for the debt, for whatever else is going on with him. Your father's going to want to press charges, Mom said. You know how he is about right and wrong. There's no gray area for him. Then we'll have to help him see that this is all gray area, I said. That family is gray area. We sat in silence for a while longer, the rain continuing its steady rhythm. I thought about Marcus inside, alone with his guilt and fear. I thought about Dad upstairs, probably pacing the bedroom, trying to figure out how his son had become a stranger. I thought about our family, fractured and broken, and wondered if there was any way to put the pieces back together. Mom, I said slowly, an idea forming. What if we approached this differently? What if instead of focusing on punishment, we focused on making things right? What do you mean? I mean, what if Marcus worked to pay back what he stole? What if he got help for the gambling addiction? What if we, all of us, went to family therapy to deal with the underlying issues? That doesn't solve the problem of the people he owes money to, Mom pointed out. The dangerous people. No, I agreed. That's a separate issue. And that one, we might need to involve the police for. If these people are threatening him, threatening all of us, that's not something we can handle on our own. He'll never agree to that, Mom said. He's terrified of them. Then we'll have to convince him that he should be more terrified of what happens if we don't deal with them, I said. Because this can't continue. He can't live under that threat forever, and neither can we. Mom squeezed my hand. When did you get so wise? She asked, a small, sad smile on her face. I'm not wise, I said. I'm just trying to figure this out like everyone else. We should go back inside, Mom said. We should talk to your father. And Marcus. We need to make some decisions. We stood up, and I followed her back into the house. The warmth hit me immediately, along with the familiar smells of home. But it felt different now, tainted by everything that had been revealed. The house that had always been my safe haven now felt fragile, like it might crumble at any moment. Dad was back in the living room, sitting in his chair again. Marcus was still on the couch, in the same position I'd left him. They both looked up as we entered, their faces drawn and tired. "We need to talk," Mom said, her voice stronger than it had been. "All of us. We need to figure out what we're going to do." "What's there to figure out?" Dad said. "He broke the law. He stole from us. We report it and let the justice system handle it." "It's not that simple," I said, sitting back down on the couch. "There are complications." "Like what?" Dad asked. "Like the fact that he's our son," Mom said. "Like the fact that sending him to prison doesn't get our money back. Like the fact that there are dangerous people involved who might retaliate if we involve the police. So we just let him get away with it?" Dad asked, his voice rising. "We just pretend this never happened?" "No," I said firmly. "We don't pretend anything. We deal with it. But we deal with it as a family, not as adversaries." "He made himself our adversary when he stole from us," Dad said, but I could hear the pain underneath the anger. "Dad," Marcus said quietly, "I know I don't have the right to ask for anything. I know I've destroyed your trust and your financial security and probably your love for me. But I'm asking anyway. Please. Give me a chance to make this right." "How?" Dad demanded. "How do you make this right? You've taken almost $50,000 from us. You've ruined our credit. You've put our retirement at risk. How do you fix that?" "I'll work," Marcus said. "I'll get a second job, a third job if I have to. I'll pay back every penny. It'll take years, but I'll do it. And I'll get help. For the gambling. I'll go to meetings, I'll see a therapist, whatever it takes." "And the people you owe money to?" I asked. "The ones threatening you?" Marcus's face went pale. "I don't know. I don't know how to handle them." "We go to the police," Dad said. "We tell them everything. Let them deal with it." "They'll kill me," Marcus said, and the fear in his voice was real and raw. "Or they'll hurt you. They've made it very clear what happens to people who talk." "Then we need protection," I said. "We need to talk to someone who understands this kind of situation. Maybe a lawyer who specializes in this kind of thing. Or the FBI. Isn't loan sharking and extortion federal?" "I don't know," Marcus said. "I don't know anything anymore. I'm so tired. I'm so tired of being scared and lying and pretending everything's okay when it's all falling apart." The vulnerability in his voice, the complete breakdown of his defenses, it did something to the atmosphere in the room. I saw Dad's expression soften slightly, saw Mom move closer to Marcus, her maternal instinct overriding her anger. "Baby," Mom said, sitting down next to Marcus on the couch. "Why didn't you come to us? When it first started, when you first got in trouble, why didn't you ask for help?" "Because I was ashamed," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "Because I knew I'd screwed up. Because I didn't want to be the failure son who couldn't handle his own problems. Because I thought I could fix it myself." "Pride," Dad said, shaking his head. "Damn pride. It'll destroy you every time." "It wasn't just pride," Marcus said, looking up at Dad. "It was fear. Fear that you'd look at me the way you're looking at me right now. Like I'm a disappointment. Like I'm not the son you wanted. The words hung in the air, heavy with years of unspoken hurt. Dad's face went through a series of emotions: anger, pain, confusion, and finally, something that looked like understanding. Is that really what you think? Dad asked quietly. That you're not the son I wanted? What else am I supposed to think? Marcus said. You've spent my entire life comparing me to her, holding her up as the example of what I should be. She's successful, she's ambitious, she's everything you wanted in a child. And I'm just Marcus. The boring accountant who never left town. That's not true, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Marcus challenged. When was the last time you bragged about me to your friends? When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing, not because you needed help with something? Dad opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. He looked stricken, like he'd been slapped. I felt a pang of sympathy for him, but also a recognition that Marcus was right. Dad had always been proud of me, had always talked about my accomplishments. But Marcus, he'd been taken for granted. I didn't realize, Dad said finally, his voice rough. I didn't realize I was making you feel that way. How could you not realize? Marcus asked, and now the anger was back, hot and sharp. How could you not see what you were doing? Because I'm human, Dad said, his own anger rising to meet Marcus's. Because I'm not perfect. Because I made mistakes. But that doesn't excuse what you did. You don't get to steal from us and then blame it on hurt feelings. I'm not blaming it on anything, Marcus said. I'm explaining. There's a difference. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. I could feel my heart pounding, could feel the familiar anxiety that came with family conflict. This was the moment, I realized. This was where we either came together or fell apart completely. Stop, I said, loud enough to cut through their argument. Both of you, just stop. This isn't helping. They both turned to look at me, and I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. Marcus, what you did was wrong. Unforgivably wrong. You stole from people who loved you, who trusted you. And no amount of feeling overlooked or underappreciated justifies that. You need to own that. Completely. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. But, I continued, turning to Dad, he's not wrong about how we've treated him. How I've treated him. We have taken him for granted. We have made him feel invisible. And while that doesn't excuse the theft, it does explain some of the desperation that led to it. So what are you saying? Dad asked. That this is our fault? I'm saying it's everyone's fault, I said. We're all responsible for the dysfunction in this family. Marcus for his choices, us for our neglect. And if we want any chance of fixing this, we all have to acknowledge our part in it. The room fell silent again. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving behind the sound of dripping water and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. The storm was passing, but the damage remained. I think, Mom said slowly, we need to take this one step at a time. First, we need to deal with the immediate threat. These people Marcus owes money to. We need to find a way to handle that safely. Agreed, I said. Marcus, do you have any documentation? Names, amounts, communication records? Some, Marcus said. Mostly text messages and emails. They're careful, but there's a trail. We'll need that, I said. And then we need to talk to someone who knows how to handle this kind of situation. A lawyer, maybe a detective who specializes in organized crime. And if they come after us? Dad asked. If reporting them puts us in danger? Then we'll deal with that too, I said. But we can't live under this threat forever. None of us can. What about the money? Mom asked. What about what he took from us? I'll pay it back, Marcus said immediately. However long it takes, I'll pay it back. With what? Dad asked. You're in debt up to your eyeballs. How are you going to pay us back when you owe $70,000 to loan sharks? I'll figure it out, Marcus said. I'll sell everything I own. I'll work every hour I can. I'll do whatever it takes. That's not a plan, Dad said. That's a fantasy. Then help me make a real plan, Marcus said, and there was a pleading note in his voice now. Help me figure out how to fix this. Please. Dad looked at Mom, then at me, then back at Marcus. I could see the war playing out on his face, the struggle between his anger and his love, his sense of justice and his paternal instinct. We'll need to see everything, Dad said finally. Every account, every debt, every transaction. We need to know exactly how bad this is. Okay, Marcus said, relief flooding his face. Okay, I can do that. And you're getting help, Mom added. Professional help. For the gambling and for whatever else is going on. That's non-negotiable. I will, Marcus promised. I'll do whatever you want. And we're going to therapy, I said. All of us. Family therapy. Because this isn't just about Marcus's problems. This is about all of us and how we relate to each other. I don't need therapy, Dad started, but Mom cut him off. Yes, you do, she said firmly. We all do. This family is broken, and we need help fixing it. Dad looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Mom's expression stopped him. He nodded slowly, reluctantly. Fine, he said. We'll do therapy. But Marcus, if you slip up, if you lie to us again or take one more dollar that isn't yours, I'm done. I'll press charges and I won't look back. Do you understand? I understand, Marcus said. I won't let you down again. I swear. The promise hung in the air, fragile and uncertain. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this was the turning point, that from here we could rebuild. But trust, once broken, was hard to restore. It would take time, effort, and a lot of painful honesty. It's late, Mom said, glancing at the clock on the mantel. It's almost midnight. We should all get some sleep and start fresh in the morning. I'm not sure I can sleep, Dad said, but he stood up, his movements slow and tired. Try, Mom said gently. We all need to try. Marcus stood too, hesitating like he wanted to say something more. Finally, he just nodded and headed for the stairs. I heard his footsteps on the old wooden steps, heard his bedroom door close. The same bedroom he'd had since childhood, with the same posters on the walls and the same creaky floorboard by the window. You can stay in your old room, Mom said to me. I put fresh sheets on the bed last week. Thanks, I said, but I didn't move. I sat there on the couch, my mind spinning with everything that had happened. Mom and Dad headed upstairs, and I heard their bedroom door close. The house settled into silence, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the gutters and the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I sat there in the dim light of the living room, looking at the family photos on the mantel. There we all were, frozen in happier times. Marcus and me as kids, gap-toothed and grinning. Mom and Dad on their wedding day, young and hopeful. Family vacations, holidays, graduations. A whole life documented in frames. But looking at them now, I wondered what I'd missed. What had been happening behind those smiles? What pain had Marcus been hiding even then? Had there been signs, moments when he tried to reach out and we'd been too distracted to notice? I thought about the summer he'd mentioned, when he wanted to go to that MIT program. I remembered him talking about it, remembered the excitement in his voice. And then I remembered him going quiet about it, remembered assuming he'd just lost interest. But he hadn't lost interest. He'd been told no while I'd been told yes. How many other times had that happened? How many other small rejections had accumulated over the years, building into the resentment and pain that had driven him to such desperate measures? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my messages with Marcus. They were sparse, perfunctory. Happy birthday. Thanks. How are you? Good, you? Merry Christmas. You too. Years of communication reduced to the bare minimum. When had we stopped really talking? When had we become strangers who happened to share DNA? I thought about calling someone, one of my friends back in the city, someone I could vent to about this insane situation. But what would I say? My brother stole $50,000 from our parents because he has a gambling addiction, and also he's been feeling neglected his whole life, and maybe we're all terrible people. It sounded absurd even in my head. Instead, I just sat there, letting the weight of the day settle over me. The rain had stopped completely now, and through the window I could see stars beginning to peek through the breaking clouds. The storm had passed, but the damage remained. And tomorrow, we have to start the long, painful process of cleaning up. I must have dozed off on the couch because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows and I could smell coffee brewing in the kitchen. I sat up, my neck stiff from the awkward angle I'd been sleeping at, and checked my phone. 7:30 in the morning. I'd slept for maybe 5 hours, and I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I found Mom in the kitchen, standing at the counter with a mug of coffee, staring out the window at the backyard. She looked like she hadn't slept at all, her eyes red and puffy, her hair uncombed. "Morning," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, managing a weak smile. "Morning, honey. Coffee?" "Please," I said, and she poured me a cup from the pot. I added cream and sugar, the familiar ritual comforting in its normalcy. "Did you sleep?" I asked. "A little," she said. "Your father was up most of the night. I could hear him pacing." "And Marcus?" "I don't know," she said. "His door is still closed." We stood there in silence, sipping our coffee. The kitchen looked the same as it always had, the same yellow curtains, the same ceramic rooster on the windowsill, the same magnet-covered refrigerator. But everything felt different, like I was seeing it all through a new lens. "I've been thinking," Mom said after a while. "About what Marcus said. About how we treated him." "Mom," I started, but she held up a hand. "No, let me say this," she said. "He was right. We did favor you. I didn't want to admit it last night, didn't want to face it, but it's true. You were always easier, more outgoing, more like me. And Marcus, he was quiet and self-sufficient, and I think we let him be. We assumed he was fine because he never complained. You didn't mean to hurt him, I said. But we did hurt him, Mom said, her voice breaking. We hurt him so badly that he felt like he had nowhere to turn when he was in trouble. What kind of parents does that make us? Human ones, I said. Flawed ones. But ones who love him. Love isn't enough though, is it? Mom said. Love without attention, without effort, without really seeing the person, what good is it? I didn't have an answer for that. She was right, in a way. Love was supposed to be the foundation, but it needed more than that to build on. It needed presence, awareness, effort. We'll do better, I said. Starting now, we'll do better. Will we? Mom asked, and the doubt in her voice was painful to hear. Or will we fall back into old patterns? Will Marcus always be the afterthought, the one we remember to call after we've already talked to you? Not if we're conscious of it, I said. Not if we actively work to change. I want to believe that, Mom said. I really do. Footsteps on the stairs announced Dad's arrival. He came into the kitchen looking haggard, his hair sticking up in odd directions, his face unshaven. He poured himself coffee without a word and leaned against the counter. We need to make some calls today, he said, his voice rough from lack of sleep. Find a lawyer. Maybe talk to the police, see what our options are. We should talk to Marcus first, I said. Get all the information from him. Names, amounts, everything. I don't want to look at him right now, Dad admitted. I'm still too angry. You're going to have to, Mom said gently. We all are. We can't fix this if we're avoiding each other. Dad nodded, but he didn't look happy about it. We finished our coffee in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. The normalcy of the morning, the sunlight and the coffee and the familiar kitchen, felt surreal against the backdrop of last night's revelations. Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking even worse than the rest of us. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale, and he was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. He hesitated at the threshold, like he wasn't sure if he was welcome. Come in, Mom said. Sit down. Have some coffee. He moved slowly, carefully, like he was afraid of setting something off. He poured coffee with shaking hands and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten thousands of meals as a family. The same table where we'd done homework and played board games and had countless conversations. Now it felt like a negotiating table, a place where we'd hash out the terms of our continued relationship. We need information, Dad said without preamble. Everything. No more secrets, no more lies. Okay, Marcus said quietly. What do you want to know? Start with the gambling, I said. When did it start? How much have you lost total? Marcus took a deep breath, wrapping his hands around his coffee mug like he needed the warmth. It started about 3 years ago, he said. I was bored, lonely. I'd just broken up with Sarah, remember her? And I was spending a lot of nights alone. I saw an ad for an online poker site and I thought, why not? It's just for fun. But it wasn't just for fun, Mom said. Not for long, Marcus admitted. At first I was just playing small stakes, $5 or $10 a hand. And I was winning. Not a lot, but enough to make it exciting. Enough to make me feel good. And I needed that. I needed something that was mine, something I was good at. So you kept playing, I said. I kept playing, Marcus confirmed. And the stakes got higher. I started playing in bigger tournaments, betting more money. And I kept winning, at least at first. I won almost $10,000 in one night. It felt incredible. Like I'd finally found something I was good at. But then you started losing, Dad said. Yeah, Marcus said. The losses started small, but they added up. And I kept thinking I could win it back. That's the thing about gambling. It tricks your brain into thinking the next hand, the next game, that's the one that'll turn it all around. So I kept playing. And I kept losing. How much? I asked. Total, how much have you lost? Marcus was quiet for a moment, his jaw working. Close to $120,000, he finally said. The number hit like a bomb. $120,000. It was an incomprehensible amount, a life-changing amount. Jesus Christ, Dad breathed. How is that even possible? It adds up fast, Marcus said. Especially when you're chasing losses. I'd lose $5,000 and bet $10,000 trying to win it back. I'd lose that and bet $20,000. It spiraled out of control so fast. And the people you owe money to, Mom said. The dangerous ones. How did you get involved with them? When I maxed out my credit cards and drained my savings, I needed more money to keep playing, Marcus said. I found these guys online. They offered loans, no questions asked, no credit check. The interest rates were insane, but I was desperate. I thought I'd win big and pay them back right away. But you didn't win big, I said. No, Marcus said. I lost. And then I owed them money I didn't have. They started calling, texting, showing up at my apartment. They made it very clear what would happen if I didn't pay. What did they say exactly? Dad asked. What were the threats? Marcus's hands tightened around his mug. They said they'd break my legs. That they'd burn down my apartment. That they'd hurt my family. They sent me pictures of you guys. Of the house. They knew where you lived, where you worked. They knew everything. The fear in his voice was palpable, and I felt a chill run down my spine. These weren't empty threats. These were real, dangerous people. That's when you started stealing from us, Mom said. That's when I panicked, Marcus said. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't go to the police because they said they'd kill me if I did. I couldn't come to you because I was too ashamed. So I took the easy way out. I took your money. There was nothing easy about it, Dad said harshly. You had to actively deceive us. You had to look us in the eye and lie. I know, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. I know what I did. I live with it every day. We need names, I said, trying to keep us focused. We need to know who these people are if we're going to deal with them. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through it with trembling fingers. He pulled up text messages, showing us the threats. The messages were crude and explicit, leaving no doubt about the seriousness of the danger. There were photos too, like he'd said. Pictures of our parents' house, of Dad's car, of Mom at the grocery store. They'd been watching, documenting, preparing. This is stalking, I said. This is extortion and harassment. This is way beyond just loan sharking. I know, Marcus said. But what can we do? If we go to the police, they'll know. They'll retaliate. We can't live like this, Mom said firmly. We can't live in fear. We have to do something. Dad had been quiet, studying the messages on Marcus's phone. Now he looked up, his expression grim but determined. "We're going to the FBI," he said. "This is organized crime. This is exactly what they handle. And we're going to ask for protection." "They won't protect us," Marcus said. "We're not important enough." "We won't know until we try," Dad said. "And we're trying. Today." The decisiveness in his voice left no room for argument. For all his anger and hurt, Dad was still Dad. When there was a problem, he faced it head on. It was one of the things I'd always admired about him. "What about the money I took?" Marcus asked. "Are you going to report that too?" Dad and Mom exchanged a long look. I could see the communication passing between them, the silent conversation of a couple who'd been together for decades. "Not yet," Mom said finally. "We'll deal with the immediate threat first. Then we'll figure out the rest." "But there will be consequences," Dad added. "Make no mistake about that. You will pay back every penny, and you will face whatever legal ramifications we decide are appropriate." "I understand," Marcus said. "Thank you. For not turning me in right away. For giving me a chance." "Don't thank us yet," Dad said. "This is far from over. We spent the rest of the morning gathering information. Marcus showed us everything, every account, every transaction, every threatening message. It was overwhelming, the sheer scope of the deception and the debt. But it was also clarifying. We knew what we were dealing with now. We knew the enemy." Dad made calls, finding a lawyer who specialized in criminal defense and organized crime. We had an appointment for that afternoon. In the meantime, we compiled everything into a folder, printed out statements and messages, created a timeline of events. It felt good to be doing something, to be taking action instead of just drowning in the horror of it all. Around noon, Mom made sandwiches, and we ate in the kitchen, the four of us together for the first time in months. It should have been nice, a family meal, but the tension was still thick. We ate in near silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I kept looking at Marcus, trying to reconcile the person I thought I knew with the person who'd done these things. He looked so ordinary, so normal. But he'd been living a double life, hiding this massive secret while pretending everything was fine. How had I not seen it? How had none of us seen it? After lunch, we drove to the lawyer's office in Dad's car. The four of us crammed into the sedan, Marcus in the back seat next to me, staring out the window. The day was beautiful, sunny and clear after last night's storm, but it felt wrong somehow. Like the weather should match the darkness of our situation. The lawyer's office was in a nondescript building downtown, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing. We took the elevator to the third floor and were ushered into a conference room by a young receptionist. The room was all dark wood and leather chairs, with law books lining the walls and a view of the parking lot through the window. The lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen, was in her 50s with sharp eyes and an air of competence that was immediately reassuring. She listened as we laid out the situation, taking notes on a legal pad, asking clarifying questions. She didn't seem shocked or judgmental, just focused and professional. "This is serious," she said when we'd finished. "The loan sharking, the threats, the stalking, these are federal crimes. The FBI will definitely be interested. As for the theft from your parents," she looked at Marcus, "that's also serious. That's felony theft, potentially multiple counts. You could be looking at significant prison time." Marcus went pale, but he nodded. I understand, he said. However, Patricia continued, if you cooperate fully with the investigation into the loan sharks, if you provide testimony and evidence, the prosecutor might be willing to work with you. Reduced charges, maybe probation instead of prison time. It's not guaranteed, but it's possible. What about our safety? Mom asked. If Marcus testifies against these people, won't that put us all in danger? The FBI can provide protection, Patricia said. Witness protection in extreme cases, or at minimum increased police presence and monitoring. They take threats seriously, especially when there's documented evidence like you have. What do we do next? Dad asked. I'll make some calls, Patricia said. I have contacts at the FBI. We'll set up a meeting, probably early next week. In the meantime, I want you all to be careful. Vary your routines, be aware of your surroundings, don't go anywhere alone if you can help it. The seriousness of her tone sent a chill through me. This was real. We were in real danger. These weren't just abstract threats anymore. They were concrete, immediate, and terrifying. We left the lawyer's office in a daze. The sunlight felt too bright, the normal sounds of the city too loud. People were going about their days, shopping and laughing and living their lives, completely unaware that our world had been turned upside down. The drive home was silent. We were all processing, trying to absorb everything that had been said. The possibility of Marcus going to prison. The danger we were all in. The long road ahead of us. Back at the house, we gathered in the living room again. It was becoming our war room, the place where we hashed out the difficult conversations. Dad sat in his chair, Mom on the couch, Marcus and I in the other chairs. We looked at each other, this fractured family, and I wondered if we'd ever be whole again. I need to say something, Marcus said, breaking the silence. I need you all to understand something. We're listening, Mom said. I know I've apologized, Marcus said. I know I've said I'm sorry. But I don't think you understand how sorry I am. How much I hate myself for what I've done. I lie awake at night thinking about it, about how I've destroyed everything. And I know that sorry isn't enough. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know that I would do anything, to take it back. His voice broke on the last words, and tears started streaming down his face. It was the first time I'd seen him cry since we were kids, and it was jarring. This was my little brother, the one I was supposed to protect, and he was falling apart in front of me. Mom moved to him immediately, wrapping her arms around him. He collapsed into her embrace, sobbing like a child. Dad watched, his expression conflicted, torn between his anger and his love. I felt my own tears starting, the emotion of the past 24 hours finally overwhelming me. We sat like that for a long time, Marcus crying in Mom's arms, the rest of us bearing witness to his pain. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase what he'd done. But it was real, and it was raw, and it was a start. Eventually, Marcus pulled himself together, wiping his face with his sleeve. Sorry, he said. I didn't mean to break down like that. You're allowed to have feelings, Mom said gently. Even now. Especially now. I think we all need to have feelings, I said. We've been so focused on the practical stuff, on the legal issues and the threats and the money, that we haven't really dealt with the emotional side of this. What's there to deal with? Dad asked. He betrayed us. We're hurt and angry. That's the emotional side. It's more complicated than that, I said. There's the betrayal, yes. But there's also the guilt we're all feeling about how we treated Marcus. There's the fear about the threats. There's the grief over what this family used to be and what it's become. There's a lot to unpack. You sound like a therapist, Dad said, but there was no bite to it. Maybe we need a therapist, I said. Maybe that's exactly what we need. Patricia mentioned someone, Mom said. When we were leaving. She gave me a card for a family therapist who specializes in crisis situations. I have it in my purse. We should call them, I said. We should set up an appointment as soon as possible. Dad looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. You're right, he said. We need help. Professional help. This is beyond what we can handle on our own. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. Dad admitting he needed help, that we all needed help, was a big step. He'd always been the type to handle things himself, to be the strong one, the provider, the problem solver. Admitting vulnerability didn't come easy to him. The rest of the day passed in a strange limbo. We moved through the house like ghosts, each of us processing in our own way. Mom cooked dinner, finding comfort in the familiar routine. Dad worked in the garage, tinkering with something, needing the physical activity. Marcus stayed in his room, and I didn't blame him. He needed space, time to deal with everything. I found myself in my old bedroom, sitting on the bed I'd slept in as a teenager. The room was mostly the same, though Mom had redecorated a bit. My old posters were gone, replaced with neutral art. The desk where I'd done homework was now a sewing table. But the bones of it were the same closet where I'd hidden diary entries, the same window where I'd snuck out to meet friends, the same carpet where I'd sat and talked on the phone for hours. I thought about all the years I'd spent in this room, all the growing up I'd done here. And I thought about Marcus in his room down the hall, doing his own growing up, feeling invisible and overlooked. How had we lived in the same house, shared the same parents, and had such different experiences? My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Jenna. Haven't heard from you in a few days. Everything okay? I stared at the message, trying to figure out how to respond. Everything was decidedly not okay, but I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know how to put into words the chaos my family had become. Family stuff, I typed back. It's complicated. I'll call you soon. Her response came immediately. Here if you need me. The simple offer of support made my eyes sting with tears. I had people in my life who cared about me, who would be there for me. Did Marcus have that? Did he have friends he could turn to, people who would support him through this? Or had he been as isolated in his friendships as he'd been in his family? Dinner was a quiet affair. Mom had made pot roast, one of her standards, and we ate at the kitchen table. The food was good, but it was hard to taste it through the anxiety and tension. We made small talk, carefully avoiding the elephant in the room, but it felt forced and awkward. After dinner, I helped Mom with the dishes while Dad and Marcus retreated to the living room. I could hear the low murmur of their voices, couldn't make out the words, but the tone seemed less hostile than before. Maybe they were making progress. Maybe they were finding a way to talk to each other. Mom, I said as I dried a plate, can I ask you something? Of course, honey, she said. Do you think we can come back from this? As a family, I mean. Do you think we can ever be okay again? Mom was quiet for a moment, her hand still in the soapy water. I don't know, she said finally. I want to believe we can. I want to believe that love is strong enough to overcome this. But I'm scared. I'm scared that the damage is too deep, that we've broken something that can't be fixed. I'm scared too, I admitted. I'm scared that even if we get through the legal stuff, even if we deal with the loan sharks and the debt, we'll never really trust each other again. Trust takes time to rebuild, Mom said. And it takes consistent effort. Marcus will have to prove himself, day after day, choice after choice. And we'll have to be willing to give him that chance. Are you willing? I asked. To give him that chance? Mom pulled her hands out of the water, drying them on a towel. She looked at me, her eyes tired but determined. He's my son, she said. I don't have a choice. I have to be willing. The alternative is losing him forever, and I can't do that. I won't do that. Even after what he did? Even after what he did, Mom confirmed. Because at the end of the day, he's still my baby. He's still the little boy I rocked to sleep and bandaged scraped knees for and cheered on at soccer games. He made terrible choices, but he's not a terrible person. And I have to believe he can be better. Her words settled over me, heavy with truth. She was right. Marcus had done terrible things, but he wasn't irredeemable. He was human, flawed and broken and desperate, but human. And humans could change. They could grow. They could heal. We finished the dishes in silence, and I went back to the living room. Dad and Marcus were sitting across from each other, and the atmosphere felt different. Less hostile, more sad. They looked up as I entered. We were just talking about the old days, Dad said. Remember when Marcus won that science fair in 8th grade? I did remember, vaguely. Marcus had built some kind of robot that could navigate a maze. He'd been so proud of it. You stayed up for 3 nights straight working on that thing, Dad said to Marcus. Your mother was worried you'd make yourself sick. I wanted to win, Marcus said softly. I wanted to make you proud. You did, Dad said. I was proud. I am proud. Of that, of your work ethic, of a lot of things. I know I haven't said it enough. I know I've taken you for granted. But I am proud of you, son. Even now, even with all this mess, I'm proud that you're facing it, that you're trying to make it right. Marcus's eyes filled with tears again. Thanks, Dad, he whispered. That means a lot. It was a small moment, but it felt monumental. Dad expressing pride in Marcus, Marcus accepting it, the two of them connecting in a way they hadn't in years. It gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way through this. The evening wore on, and eventually we all drifted off to our respective rooms. I lay in my old bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling. I could hear Dad snoring through the wall, Mom's lighter breathing. Somewhere down the hall, Marcus was probably lying awake too, his mind spinning with fear and regret. I thought about the FBI meeting that would happen next week. I thought about Marcus potentially testifying against dangerous criminals. I thought about the long process of paying back the stolen money, of rebuilding trust, of healing as a family. It all seemed overwhelming, impossible even. But we'd taken the first steps. We'd faced the truth. We'd started talking, really talking, about the issues that had been festering for years. It wasn't much, but it was something. And sometimes, something was enough to build on. I must have eventually fallen asleep because I woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. Sunday morning. In the old days, we would have gone to church, then come home for a big breakfast. But those days felt like they belonged to a different family, a different life. I got up and went downstairs, finding everyone already in the kitchen. Mom was making pancakes, Dad was reading the paper, and Marcus was sitting at the table with his laptop open. "Morning," I said, pouring myself coffee. "Morning," they chorused back. "I'm looking at apartments," Marcus said, gesturing to his laptop. "Smaller places, cheaper rent. I need to cut my expenses if I'm going to pay you back." "You don't have to move right away," Mom said. "You can stay here for a while if you need to." "No," Marcus said firmly. "I need to do this. I need to start taking responsibility, making changes. And part of that is living within my means." "What about your job?" I asked. "Are you going to tell them what's happening?" "I have to," Marcus said. "If this goes to trial, if I end up with a criminal record, they'll find out anyway. Better to be upfront about it." "They might fire you," Dad pointed out. "I know," Marcus said. "But that's a consequence I have to accept. I can't keep hiding, keep pretending. That's what got me into this mess in the first place." There was a maturity in his words, a taking of ownership that I hadn't heard before. Maybe this crisis, as terrible as it was forcing him to grow in ways he hadn't before. Maybe sometimes you had to hit rock bottom before you could start climbing back up. We ate breakfast together, and this time the conversation flowed more naturally. We talked about practical things, about the FBI meeting, about finding a therapist, about Marcus's plan to downsize his life. We didn't talk about the big emotional stuff, but we didn't need to. We'd done enough of that. Now we needed to focus on moving forward. After breakfast, I made the decision to stay another day. I'd planned to drive back to the city that afternoon, but it didn't feel right to leave yet. My family needed me, and I needed to be here. I called my boss, explained I had a family emergency and needed to work remotely for a few days. She was understanding, told me to take the time I needed. The rest of Sunday passed quietly. We watched a movie together, some comedy that none of us really paid attention to, but that filled the silence. We ordered pizza for dinner, too tired to cook. We existed together in the same space, and while it wasn't comfortable, it wasn't unbearable either. We were learning how to be around each other again, how to navigate this new reality. Monday morning, Patricia called. She'd set up a meeting with the FBI for Tuesday afternoon. We'd need to bring all the documentation, all the evidence. Marcus would need to be prepared to tell his story in detail, to answer difficult questions. It was happening. We were really doing this. That night, we had our first family therapy session. Mom had called the therapist Patricia recommended, and she'd had a cancellation that evening. We drove to her office, a cozy space in a converted house with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. The therapist, Dr. Sarah Winters, was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. She started by having us each introduce ourselves and explain why we were there. It was harder than I expected, putting it all into words for a stranger. But Dr. Winters listened without judgment, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. "What I'm hearing," she said when we'd all spoken, "is a family in crisis. But I'm also hearing a family that wants to heal. That's important. That's the foundation we'll build on." Over the next hour, she guided us through a conversation about our family dynamics, about the patterns that had developed over the years. She pointed out things we hadn't seen, like how Dad's silence often came across as disapproval, or how Mom's focus on me had been a way of avoiding her own disappointments. She helped Marcus articulate his feelings in a way that didn't sound like blame, and she helped us hear him without getting defensive. It was exhausting and uncomfortable and sometimes painful. But it was also necessary. We were finally talking about the things that had been buried for years, finally shining light into the dark corners of our family. At the end of the session, Dr. Winters gave us homework. We were each supposed to write a letter to the others, expressing our feelings and our hopes for the future. We'd share them at our next session. The drive home was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. Thoughtful rather than tense. We were all processing, thinking about what had been said. Tuesday came too quickly. We dressed carefully for the FBI meeting, like we were going to court. In a way, I suppose we were. We were presenting our case, asking for help, putting our lives in the hands of strangers. The FBI office was intimidating, all security checkpoints and serious-faced agents. We were led to a conference room where two agents were waiting, a man and a woman, both in their 30s, both with that same air of competent authority that Patricia had. They introduced themselves as Agent Rodriguez and Agent Kim. They listened as Marcus told his story, occasionally stopping him to ask questions or clarify details. They looked through the documentation we'd brought, the threatening messages, the financial records, the timeline we'd created. "This is good," Agent Rodriguez said when Marcus had finished. "This is solid evidence. We've been trying to build a case against this organization for months. Your testimony could be the break we need." "What about protection?" Dad asked. "What about keeping my family safe?" "We'll provide protection," Agent Kim assured us. "We'll have agents watching your house, monitoring your movements. If the threat level increases, we can move you to a safe location. We take witness safety very seriously." "What about charges against Marcus?" I asked. "For the theft?" "That's up to the local prosecutor," Agent Rodriguez said. "But we'll put in a good word. Cooperation in a federal investigation carries weight. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card, but it helps." Marcus nodded, his face pale but determined. "I'll do whatever you need," he said. "I'll testify, I'll wear a wire, whatever it takes." "We'll be in touch," Agent Kim said. "In the meantime, be careful. Don't change your routines too dramatically, that might tip them off that something's happening. But be aware. Be smart." We left the FBI office feeling both relieved and terrified. We'd taken a major step, but we'd also painted a target on our backs. The loan sharks would eventually figure out that Marcus had talked. And when they did, there would be consequences. The next few weeks were a blur of activity and anxiety. Marcus met with the FBI multiple times, providing more information, identifying people and photos, building the case. Agents were a constant presence around our parents' house, unmarked cars parked on the street, unfamiliar faces watching from a distance. We continued with therapy, both family sessions and individual ones. I learned things about my family I'd never known. I learned that Mom had struggled with depression after I was born, that she'd felt like a failure as a mother. I learned that Dad had grown up in a household where affection wasn't shown, where love was expressed through providing rather than words. I learned that Marcus had been bullied in middle school, something he'd never told anyone, and that it had shaped his view of himself as someone who didn't matter. We learned how to communicate better, how to express our needs and feelings without attacking or defending. We learned how to listen, really listen, to each other. It was hard work, harder than any of us had expected. But slowly, incrementally, we started to feel like a family again. Marcus moved into a smaller apartment, a one-bedroom in a less expensive part of town. He sold his car and bought a used one for cash. He picked up a second job, working nights at a warehouse. Every penny he could spare went toward paying back our parents. It would take years, we all knew that, but he was committed. The gambling was harder to quit than he'd expected. He went to Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times a week, got a sponsor, worked the steps. There were slip-ups, moments when the urge was overwhelming and he almost gave in. But he called his sponsor, called us, and he got through it. One day at a time, one choice at a time. I started coming home more often, making the drive every other weekend instead of just on holidays. I called more, not just the obligatory Sunday check-ins but real conversations. I asked Marcus about his life, his job, his recovery. I made an effort to see him as a person, not just my little brother. Dad started expressing his feelings more, telling us he loved us, that he was proud of us. It was awkward at first, the words unfamiliar in his mouth. But he kept at it, and it got easier. He and Marcus started having breakfast together every Saturday morning, just the two of them, rebuilding their relationship one meal at a time. Mom started therapy for herself, dealing with her own issues, her own guilt and regret. She learned to set boundaries, to not take on everyone else's emotions as her own. She learned that she could love both her children equally, that it wasn't a competition or a zero-sum game. 2 months after our meeting with the FBI, they made their move. A coordinated raid on multiple locations, dozens of arrests. The loan sharks Marcus had been involved with were among them, along with their bosses and associates. It was all over the news, a major bust of an organized crime ring. Marcus had to testify at the grand jury, and later at trial. It was terrifying for him, facing these people in court, knowing they could see him, could identify him. But he did it. He told the truth, provided the evidence, helped put them away. The prosecutor, true to the FBI's word, took Marcus's cooperation into account. Instead of felony charges for the theft, he was charged with a misdemeanor. He got probation, community service, and a requirement to continue with therapy and Gamblers Anonymous. He'd have a criminal record, but he wouldn't go to prison. It felt like a victory, but a hollow one. The legal consequences were resolved, but the emotional ones remained. Trust was still fragile. Relationships were still being rebuilt. We were better than we had been, but we weren't healed. Not yet. 6 months after that terrible rainy night when everything came to light, we gathered at my parents' house for Thanksgiving. It was the first holiday since the revelation, and we were all nervous about how it would go. But as we sat around the table, passing dishes and sharing stories, it felt different than before. More honest. More real. We weren't pretending to be the perfect family anymore. We were just us, flawed and broken and trying our best. Before we ate, Dad asked if we could each say something we were grateful for. It was a tradition we'd had when we were kids but had let lapse over the years. "I'm grateful for second chances," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I'm grateful for a family that didn't give up on me, even when I gave them every reason to." "I'm grateful for honesty," Mom said. "Even when it's painful. Even when it's hard." "I'm grateful for growth," Dad said. "For the ability to change, to be better than we were." "I'm grateful for all of you," I said. "For the courage to face hard truths and the commitment to do the work." We ate our meal, and it was good. Not perfect, but good. And maybe that was enough. Maybe perfect was overrated. Maybe real was better. After dinner, Marcus and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen, doing dishes like we had as kids. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of running water and clinking plates filling the space. "Thank you," Marcus said suddenly. "For not giving up on me. For staying." "You're my brother," I said. "Where else would I go?" "You could have walked away," he said. "A lot of people would have. I wouldn't have blamed you." "I thought about it," I admitted. "That first night, I was so angry. I wanted to just leave, to wash my hands of the whole mess." "What stopped you?" "I don't know," I said. "Love, I guess. And the realization that I played a part in this too. That we all had. And if we all contributed to the problem, we all needed to be part of the solution." "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making this right," Marcus said. "I know I can never fully repay what I took, not just the money but the trust, the security. But I'm going to try." "I know you will," I said. "And we'll be here. Not making it easy, but being here." He smiled, a real smile, the first genuine one I'd seen from him in months. "That's all I can ask for," he said. We finished the dishes and rejoined the family in the living room. Dad had put on a football game, and Mom was knitting, her needles clicking in a soothing rhythm. Marcus sat down on the couch, and I sat next to him. We watched the game, not really caring who won, just being together. It wasn't the family I'd grown up with. That family was gone, shattered by secrets and lies and years of dysfunction. But this new family, this honest, imperfect, trying family, maybe it was better. Maybe it was more real. As I sat there, surrounded by the people who knew me best and loved me anyway, I thought about everything we'd been through. The pain, the betrayal, the fear. But also the growth, the honesty, the commitment to being better. It had been the hardest 6 months of my life, but also the most transformative. I looked at Marcus, at the dark circles that were finally starting to fade from under his eyes, at the way he sat a little straighter now, a little more confident. He had a long road ahead of him still, years of paying back debt and proving himself trustworthy. But he was on that road. He was walking it, one step at a time. I looked at Mom and Dad, at the way they sat closer together now, at the way Dad's hand rested on Mom's knee in a casual gesture of affection. They'd been forced to confront their own failings as parents, their own role in the family dysfunction. It had been painful, but it had also brought them closer together, reminded them that they were a team. And I thought about myself, about how I'd been so focused on my own life that I'd neglected the people who mattered most. I'd learned that success and ambition meant nothing if you didn't have people to share it with. I'd learned that family required effort, attention, presence. I'd learned that love wasn't enough on its own. It needed to be backed up with action. The game ended, and Dad turned off the TV. "It's getting late," he said. "We should probably call it a night." We all stood, stretching, gathering our things. Marcus was staying in his old room for the night, and I was in mine. It felt right, being back in this house, sleeping under the same roof as my family. As I headed upstairs, Mom caught my arm. "Thank you for coming home," she said. "Thank you for being here through all of this." "Where else would I be?" I asked, echoing what I'd said to Marcus earlier. She hugged me, tight and fierce. "I love you," she said. "I love both of you so much." I love you too, Mom, I said. I went to my room and got ready for bed, the familiar routine comforting. I could hear Marcus moving around in his room, could hear Mom and Dad talking quietly in theirs. The sounds of family, of home. I lay in bed, thinking about the future. There would be more challenges, I knew that. More therapy sessions, more difficult conversations, more moments of doubt and fear. Marcus's recovery from gambling addiction would be a lifelong journey. The financial debt would take years to repay. The trust we were rebuilding was still fragile, still easily broken. But we were trying. We were showing up, doing the work, being honest with each other. And that had to count for something. That had to be worth something. I thought about the title of this story, the realization that not everything is what it seems. It was true in so many ways. My perfect family had been hiding deep dysfunction. My successful life had been built on the invisible labor and sacrifice of others. My brother, who I thought was fine, had been drowning in desperation and pain. But it was also true in a hopeful way. The crisis that had seemed like it would destroy us had actually brought us closer. The brother I thought was a stranger had become someone I was getting to know, really know, for the first time. The family I thought was broken beyond repair was slowly, painfully, putting itself back together. Not everything is what it seems. Sometimes things that look perfect are rotting from the inside. But sometimes things that look broken can be mended. Sometimes families that fall apart can find their way back together. Sometimes people who make terrible mistakes can learn, grow, and become better. It wouldn't be easy. It would never be easy. But it would be real. And real, I was learning, was worth fighting for. I closed my eyes, listening to the sounds of the house settling around me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new steps on this long journey. But tonight, we were together. Tonight, we were a family. And for now, that was enough. The weeks turned into months, and the months into a year. Marcus continued his recovery, continued his payments, continued to show up and do the work. There were setbacks, moments when the old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But we caught them earlier now, addressed them before they could fester. I got a promotion at work, a big one, and the first people I called were my parents and Marcus. We celebrated together, all of us, and it felt good to share my success with them. But more than that, it felt good to hear about their lives too. Marcus's progress at work, Mom's new hobby of painting, Dad's volunteer work at the community center. We were learning to celebrate each other, not just me. The second Thanksgiving after the revelation was easier than the first. We'd established new traditions, new ways of being together. We played games after dinner, told stories, laughed together. The laughter felt earned, authentic, not the forced cheerfulness of people pretending everything was fine. Marcus brought a date, a woman he'd met at a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. Her name was Rachel, and she was kind and funny and clearly cared about him. Watching them together, seeing the way he smiled at her, the way she touched his arm in casual affection, I felt hopeful. He was building a life, a real life, not one based on lies and desperation. I'd started dating someone too, a guy named David who I'd met through work. I'd told him about my family situation early on, not wanting to hide it or pretend it didn't exist. He'd listened without judgment, had asked thoughtful questions, had told me about his own family's struggles. It felt good to be with someone who understood that families were complicated, that love and dysfunction could coexist. 2 years after that rainy night, we gathered at my parents' house for a different kind of meeting. Marcus had made his final payment. After 2 years of working multiple jobs, of living frugally, of dedicating every spare dollar to repaying what he'd stolen, he'd done it. He'd paid back every penny. We sat in the living room, the same room where so many difficult conversations had taken place, and Dad handed Marcus a receipt. Paid in full, it said. The debt was cleared. Marcus stared at the paper, tears streaming down his face. I did it, he said. I actually did it. You did, Mom said, her own eyes wet. We're so proud of you. This doesn't erase what I did, Marcus said. I know that. The money is paid back, but the trust, the hurt, that takes longer. It does, Dad agreed. But you've shown us, day after day, that you're committed to being better. That you're willing to do the work. And that means everything. We celebrated that night, a quiet celebration, just the family. We ordered Chinese food and watched old home videos, laughing at our younger selves, at the fashion choices and hairstyles, at the innocence of those earlier times. But as I watched those videos, I realized something. Those earlier times hadn't been as innocent as they seemed. The dysfunction had been there all along, hidden beneath the surface. We'd just been better at pretending back then. Now, we didn't pretend. We were honest about our struggles, our failings, our fears. We talked about the hard things. We didn't let resentments fester. We showed up for each other, not just in the big moments but in the small ones too. It wasn't perfect. We still had arguments, still hurt each other's feelings sometimes, still fell into old patterns occasionally. But we caught ourselves faster now. We apologized more readily. We forgave more easily. 3 years after the revelation, Marcus and Rachel got engaged. He asked her at a family dinner, with all of us there to witness it. She said yes, and we all cried happy tears, grateful that he'd found someone who loved him, who saw him for who he really was and chose him anyway. The wedding was small, intimate, just close family and friends. I was Marcus's best woman, a role I'd never imagined having, but that felt right. As I stood next to him at the altar, watching him pledge his life to Rachel, I thought about how far we'd all come. This was the brother who'd stolen from our parents, who'd lied and deceived and nearly destroyed our family. But he was also the brother who'd faced his demons, who'd done the hard work of recovery, who'd rebuilt his life from the ground up. He was both of those people, and I loved him for all of it. In my speech at the reception, I talked about second chances. About how families aren't defined by their worst moments, but by how they respond to them. About how love isn't about perfection, but about showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Marcus hugged me after the speech, holding on tight. Thank you, he whispered. For everything. For not giving up on me. You're my brother, I said. I'll never give up on you. The years continued to pass. Mom and Dad retired, sold the big house, and moved into a smaller place that was easier to maintain. Marcus and Rachel had a baby, a little girl they named Hope. I became an aunt, a role I took seriously, determined to be present in her life in a way I hadn't always been present in Marcus's. I married David in a ceremony on the beach, with my family standing beside me. Marcus walked me down the aisle alongside Dad, both of them teary-eyed and proud. It felt right, having them both there, acknowledging that family was complicated, that love came in many forms. We started a new tradition, an annual family vacation. Just a long weekend somewhere, nothing fancy, but time dedicated to being together. We'd rent a cabin or a beach house, cook meals together, play games, talk. It was sacred time, protected time, a reminder of what we'd almost lost and what we'd fought to keep. On one of these vacations, 5 years after that rainy night, we found ourselves sitting around a campfire. The kids were asleep inside, Hope and David's and my son, James. The adults sat in camp chairs, watching the flames dance, listening to the crickets and the distant sound of waves. "Do you ever think about that night?" Marcus asked suddenly. "The night it all came out?" "All the time," Mom said. "It was the worst night of my life. And also, in a strange way, one of the most important." "It was the night we stopped pretending," Dad said. "The night we started being real with each other." "I was so scared," Marcus said. "I thought I'd lose all of you. I thought you'd hate me forever." "We did hate you," I said honestly. "For a while. But we loved you more." "That's the thing about family," Mom said. "Love and hate, they're not opposites. They coexist. You can be furious with someone and still love them desperately." "I'm grateful," Marcus said. "For all of it. For the crisis, for the pain, for the hard work. Because it made us this. It made us real." We sat in silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to embers. I thought about the journey we'd been on, the long road from that terrible revelation to this moment of peace. It hadn't been linear. There had been setbacks and struggles, moments of doubt and fear. But we'd kept going. We'd kept showing up. "Not everything is what it seems," I said, breaking the silence. "That's what I learned from all of this. Things that look perfect can be broken. Things that look broken can heal. People are more complicated than we give them credit for. Including ourselves," David added. "We're all more complicated than we think." The fire crackled, sending up a shower of sparks into the night sky. I watched them rise and disappear, thinking about how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. We were still the same people, with the same flaws and quirks and issues. But we were also different. We were more honest, more present, more committed to each other. I looked around the circle at my family. Mom and Dad, older now but still together, still in love. Marcus and Rachel, building a life together, raising their daughter with intention and care. David, my partner, my love, who'd chosen to join this complicated, messy, beautiful family. And inside, sleeping peacefully, the next generation. Hope and James, who would grow up in a family that valued honesty over perfection, presence over performance. This was my family. Not the family I thought I had, not the perfect, uncomplicated family of my imagination. But the real family, the one that had been tested and broken and put back together. The one that had faced its demons and come out stronger. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no magical resolution, no moment where everything was suddenly perfect. We still had our struggles, our challenges, our moments of conflict. But we faced them together now. We didn't hide from the hard things. We didn't pretend. And that, I realized, was the real gift of that terrible rainy night 5 years ago. It had stripped away our illusions, forced us to see each other clearly. And in that clarity, in that honesty, we'd found something more valuable than the perfect family we'd been pretending to be. We'd found a real family, flawed and complicated and trying their best. The fire burned down to coals, glowing red in the darkness. One by one, we stood, stretching, heading inside to bed. Tomorrow we'd wake up and make breakfast together, spend the day on the beach, create more memories. But tonight, we'd sit by the fire and remember where we'd been, how far we'd come. As I lay in bed next to David, listening to his steady breathing and the sound of the ocean outside, I felt a deep sense of peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. We were real. Our love was real. Our commitment to each other was real. Not everything is what it seems. But sometimes, when you dig beneath the surface, when you face the hard truths and do the difficult work, you find something better than what you thought you had. You find authenticity. You find connection. You find family. And that, I thought as I drifted off to sleep, was worth everything we'd been through. Every painful conversation, every moment of doubt, every step on the long road to healing. It was all worth it for this. For the real, messy, beautiful family we'd become. The years continued their steady march forward. Marcus celebrated 10 years of sobriety from gambling, a milestone we all gathered to honor. He'd become a sponsor himself, helping others navigate the same dark waters he'd once been drowning in. He turned his pain into purpose, his mistakes into lessons for others. Mom published a book about her experience, a memoir about family dysfunction and healing. It was raw and honest, holding nothing back, and it resonated with thousands of readers who saw their own families reflected in our story. She did speaking engagements, helped other families navigate their own crises. She'd found her voice, her purpose. Dad started a support group for parents of adult children struggling with addiction. He met weekly with other fathers and mothers, sharing stories, offering support, learning that he wasn't alone in his pain and confusion. He'd learned to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to admit he didn't have all the answers. I continued my career, but with a different perspective. I made sure to prioritize family, to not let work consume me the way it once had. I called my parents weekly, visited regularly, made sure Marcus knew he mattered to me. I'd learned that success meant nothing if you didn't have people to share it with. 10 years after that rainy night, we gathered at my parents' new house for a special dinner. It was the anniversary, though we didn't call it that. We just called it family dinner. But we all knew what it meant, what we were marking. As we sat around the table, 3 generations now with Hope at 8 years old and James at 6, along with Rachel and Marcus's second child, a boy named Thomas who was 3. I looked at the faces of my family and felt overwhelming gratitude. We'd been through hell together. We'd faced betrayal and pain and fear. We'd been broken, shattered into pieces that seemed impossible to put back together. But we'd done it. Slowly, painfully, with countless setbacks and struggles, we'd rebuilt. And what we'd built was stronger than what we'd had before. Because it was built on truth instead of illusion, on honesty instead of pretense, on real love instead of the performance of love. Before we ate, Hope asked if we could go around the table and say what we were grateful for. It was a tradition she'd learned from us, one we'd maintained over the years. We agreed, and one by one, we shared. "I'm grateful for my family," Hope said in her clear, confident voice. "For my mom and dad and brother and all of you. I'm grateful we're all together. I'm grateful for second chances," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "For a family that believed I could be better, even when I didn't believe it myself." "I'm grateful for honesty," Rachel said. "For a family that values truth, even when it's hard." "I'm grateful for growth," Mom said. "For the ability to change, to learn, to become better than we were." "I'm grateful for forgiveness," Dad said. for the grace to move forward, to not be defined by our worst moments. I'm grateful for presence, I said. For learning to show up, to be here, to not take any of this for granted. David spoke about gratitude for being welcomed into this family, for being part of something real and meaningful. Even little James, at 6, said he was grateful for his cousins and grandparents and the love he felt. We ate our meal, the conversation flowing easily, punctuated by laughter and the occasional squabble between the kids. It was normal, ordinary, beautifully mundane. And that ordinariness felt like a miracle. After dinner, after the kids had been put to bed and the adults sat in the living room with coffee and dessert, Marcus pulled out an envelope. I wrote something, he said. I've been working on it for a while. I wanted to share it with you all tonight. He opened the envelope and pulled out several pages, his hands shaking slightly. He cleared his throat and began to read. 10 years ago, I made choices that nearly destroyed this family. I stole from the people who loved me most. I lied, I deceived, I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way. And I've spent every day since then trying to make amends, trying to be worthy of the second chance you gave me. But tonight, on this anniversary, I want to say something I've never quite been able to articulate before. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for seeing past my worst actions to the person I could become. Thank you for doing the hard work of healing alongside me, for acknowledging your own roles in our family dysfunction, for being willing to change. I know I can never fully repay what I took. Not just the money, though I did pay that back, but the sense of security, the trust, the innocence. Those things, once broken, can never be fully restored. But we've built something new in their place. Something stronger, something real. I look at my children, and I'm determined to do better for them than we did for each other. Not because you were bad parents, he looked at Mom and Dad, but because we've all learned so much. We've learned that love requires presence. That family requires effort. That honesty, even painful honesty, is better than comfortable lies. I look at my sister, and I'm grateful for the relationship we've built. We were strangers for so long, living parallel lives that rarely intersected. But now, you're one of my best friends. You're someone I can call when I'm struggling, someone who knows my worst moments and loves me anyway. I look at my wife, and I'm grateful that she chose to love me despite my past, despite my struggles. She's seen me at my lowest and believed in my ability to rise. And I look at all of you, this family we've built from the ashes of the one that burned down, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for every difficult conversation, every therapy session, every moment of uncomfortable honesty. Because all of that brought us here. To this moment. To this family. Not everything is what it seems. That's what I learned. The perfect family I thought we were was a lie. But the broken family we became, the one that faced its demons and did the work, that family is real. And real is so much better than perfect. So thank you. Thank you for this. For us. For not giving up. For believing that people can change, that families can heal, that love is stronger than betrayal. I love you all. More than I can ever express. And I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that love. By the time he finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Mom was openly sobbing, Dad was wiping his face with his handkerchief, Rachel was holding Marcus's hand tightly. I felt tears streaming down my face, felt David's arm around my shoulders. Marcus folded the pages carefully and put them back in the envelope. That's all, he said. I just needed to say it. Mom stood and went to him, wrapping him in a fierce hug. "We love you," she said. "We love you so much." Dad joined them, then Rachel, then David and me. We stood there in a group embrace, this family that had been broken and rebuilt, holding each other tight. When we finally broke apart, there was a sense of peace in the room. A sense of completion. We'd come full circle, from that terrible night of revelation to this moment of gratitude and love. The evening wound down, and eventually everyone headed home or to bed. I found myself alone in the kitchen, cleaning up the last of the dishes. Marcus came in, picking up a towel to dry. We worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before he spoke. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying. Fighting for this family. It would have been easier to walk away." I thought about it, considered the question seriously. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. It was hard, maybe the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was worth it. You were worth it. We were worth it." "I'm glad," he said. "Because I don't know what I would have done if you'd left. If any of you had left. I think I would have given up completely." "But we didn't leave," I said. "And you didn't give up. That's what matters." We finished the dishes and stood there for a moment, looking out the kitchen window at the dark yard beyond. "Not everything is what it seems," Marcus said, echoing the phrase that had become something of a family motto. "No," I agreed. "But sometimes what's real is better than what seemed to be." He smiled, that genuine smile I'd come to treasure. "Yeah," he said. "Sometimes it is." We turned off the lights and headed to our respective rooms. As I lay in bed next to David, I thought about the journey we'd been on. 10 years from crisis to healing. 10 years of hard work and painful honesty and unwavering commitment. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments when I'd wanted to give up, when the work had seemed too hard, the pain too deep. But we'd persevered. We'd shown up, day after day, choice after choice. And slowly, incrementally, we'd healed. We weren't perfect. We never would be. But we were real. We were honest. We were present. And we were family. Not the family I thought I had 10 years ago. Not the perfect, uncomplicated family of my imagination. But something better. Something earned. Something real. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a deep sense of peace. Not because our story had a neat, tidy ending, but because it didn't need one. Life wasn't about neat endings. It was about the messy middle, the daily choice to show up and do the work and love each other despite and because of our flaws. Not everything is what it seems. But sometimes, when you look beneath the surface, when you face the hard truths and do the difficult work, you find something more valuable than perfection. You find authenticity. You find connection. You find love. And that, I thought as sleep claimed me, was the real story. Not the betrayal or the crisis or the pain. But the healing. The choice to stay. The commitment to be better. The love that persisted despite everything. That was the story worth telling. The story of a family that broke and rebuilt itself. The story of people who made terrible mistakes and found redemption. The story of love that was tested and emerged stronger. Not everything is what it seems. But sometimes, what's real is more beautiful than any illusion could ever be.